Today we're going to talk about Kansas ecosystems a really long time ago and how plants and animals changed over long periods of time.
We have explored the grasslands of Kansas, the forests of Kansas, and the rivers, streams, and lakes of Kansas over the last few months. Today, we're going to explore how Kansas ecosystems have changed over long periods of time. Another way of saying that is, we are going to see how Kansas ecosystems have changed over geologic time. Over millions of years, our continents formed and the land changed. Kansas, 80 million years ago. Did you know that 80 million years ago, Kansas was part of an inland sea? Paleontologists refer to this sea as the Western Interior Seaway, and they call this time period, 80 million years ago, the Late Cretaceous period. What kinds of animals do you think might live in this sea? Just like in the oceans today and other ecosystems we have explored, back then there were tiny algae or phytoplankton. Like plants, they capture the sun's energy and use it to survive, grow, reproduce, and feed all the organisms that eat them. So, all the organisms that eat the organisms that eat phytoplankton need phytoplankton to live too. Algae were eaten by tiny zooplankton, primary consumers, which were eaten by secondary consumers, and there were tertiary consumers that ate the secondary consumers. Just like in the ocean today, we could find reptiles and fish in the sea. We don't know all of the animals that lived in the Western Interior Seaway, but we know many of them because we can find records of them in the form of fossils. When the bodies of these animals fell to the sea floor, some were covered in sediment quickly and so did not decompose very much. Their bones and other hard parts, like shells or bark, became part of the rock. This process is called fossilization, and fossilization takes a really long time to occur. We can find fossils of different ages in rocks throughout Kansas. In eastern Kansas, you can find lots of fossils that date all the way back to 315 million years ago. Examples of really old fossils you can easily find in eastern Kansas are these crinoid fossils. Embedded in rock, the segments are often broken. This is what they might have looked like on the sea floor. There are descendants of crinoids in the ocean today. We can see fossils of many of those organisms at the University of Kansas Natural History Museum. Producers, algae and plankton. Primary consumers, brachiopods and bivalves. Secondary consumers, Tusoteuthis, mosasaur. We can learn about the organisms that lived long ago by looking at their fossil remains. What does this look like to you? That's right. This is a fossil of an ancient plant. Let's look at the jaws and teeth of this fossil. What do you think it ate? Look at those sharp teeth. The mosasaur was an aquatic reptile, not a dinosaur, and ate other animals in the ocean, including fish and ammonites. What about this one? It used a filter to feed on phytoplankton and zooplankton. Over time, the oceans that covered Kansas disappeared due to changes in climate and changes in the positions of the continents. Around 2.5 million years ago, the Pleistocene time began. In Kansas, this meant a lot of change. Sometimes, during the Pleistocene, parts of Kansas were under glacial ice. During part of that time, it was very cold, and much of Kansas was tundra. As the climate began to warm up, spruce forest grew here in Kansas. When the climate got even warmer and became drier, much of Kansas became grassland and has been since then. Let's look at some of the animals that were living in Kansas during the Pleistocene. Woolly mammoth, ground sloth, camelids. Many of the animals that existed during these times went extinct. Extinct means no longer living anywhere in the world. Others were able to survive because they changed over time, adapting to changing environments, or moving to places with environments where they could survive. One example of an animal that changed over time to survive is the bison. Do you recognize this animal? It is the forest-dwelling ancestor of this animal, which is the ancestor of this animal. As the forest changed to grassland, horses' ancestors needed to be faster to run from predators instead of hiding in the trees. So their legs got longer, their longest toe became a hoof, and they got really good at eating grass. How do changes or adaptations like this happen? Did the horse's ancestors decide to change? Nope. Let's look at one example of how animals adapt. Imagine there is a group of lizards that look like this. Some individual lizards have brown coloring and some have green coloring. They live in this environment. Here comes a predator. Hide! Green lizards hide in green places. Brown lizards hide in brown places. Now the environment changes. It gets very dry. Everything is brown. Here comes the predator. The green lizards are easy to see and catch. They get eaten and do not have a chance to have many babies. Most of the babies in the next generation are brown. After many generations of the dry environment, all of the lizards born in this population are brown because the brown lizards have survived and reproduced. This is how adaptation happens, through selection over time. What if the original population was all green? Then the lizards might go extinct in the new environment. So, what did you learn about how Kansas has changed over time? Could this be Kansas? Yes, 80 million years ago, Kansas looked something like this. When do you think this fossil animal lived? This fossil is from when an ocean covered Kansas. Did the horse's ancient ancestors look like this? Nope, they looked like this. Horses' ancestors changed over time. Adaptations in these populations led to the modern horse we know today. Which color of lizard is most likely to survive and reproduce in this environment? The blue ones.
Thanks for listening.
You can find lots of books at your local library about the organisms that lived in ancient seas, as well as the amazing animals of the Ice Age.